So today I was listening to a audiobook by Grant Cardone. Not sure if you're familiar with the guy. He's kind of the same family of people as kind of Gary Vee in terms of small business, speaker, motivator kind of people. Pretty high profile entrepreneur, kind of guru sort of person. But anyway, the quote he's got that I want to share today was that the only way to increase time is to get more done in the time you have. And it's just this little snippet, just sort of said amidst otherwise this kind of whole ebook, the value of which, may or may not be for you. But what I like about that quote is it ties back to my point the other day about practice and about the value of it. And it's kind of reality no matter how much time you have, right? If you have an hour a week to work with, 2 hours a week, and like we've talked about before, sometimes, of course, the real limit isn't even maybe the hour bandwidth, but just the energy we have left over after the obligations, after the responsibilities, after the commitments that we have, which everybody's got some, and degrees vary and change over time. But that if you have an hour a week, what you can get done in that hour is ultimately kind of the real measure of your progress. And through practice, through repetition, through focus, through picking an area and really attacking it repeatedly, that's how you can increase the amount you get done. If you can increase your efficiency, if you can increase your working in familiar territory, so it's not having to constantly every single time figure out everything for the first time as if you've never seen that problem space before, that's how you start to squeeze twice as much, 3 times as much, 4 times as much out of that same time. As an example of this, so in Gamketo Club, we have our same time windows, 1 to 5 month time frames for all projects. Some of those games come up enormously more grand in scale or scope than others in the same sort of time window. And what's happening isn't necessarily actually more hours being poured into it. It's that the developers, especially the project lead on those games, have enough experience, have enough practice, have enough repetition in what they're doing that they're getting 2x, 3x, 4x, multiple times as much done in the same period of time, because again, it's not all that steep learning curve of the first time they've seen a problem. It's the 4th, 5th, 6th time they've seen certain kind of problems, which allows them to chew through it faster and then focus on how to do it better, focus on how to fit more kinds of features in, focus on more how to build more content out, focus how to get it done earlier in the schedule to leave time for iteration, experimentation, extending it, polish, those kind of things, comes from how do we get more out of the time. So we're going to go back to that Grant Cardone quote, the only way to increase time is to get more done in the time you have. And again, what I love about it is just how kind of true it is regardless of the amount of time you have to work with, of finding how can you increase the amount of ways you can use it. It also ties to this kind of common thread I often go back to of how random scattered sources of information, of how random factoids are not really learning in a useful kind of skill sense in the way they don't build on one another. There's not a sequence, there's not a pathway formed from them. They're not piling up in a way that's going to speed up your use of time. Where the speeding up is going to help you get more out of the time you have is going to come from, again, when you're working on a way that builds off of a foundation, and another layer on top of that, another layer on top of that, in a way that because you're working on a sequence of things that are able to rely upon your sort of prerequisite knowledge, counting on the experience you've already had, referring back, tying back echoes to things you've already done, that's where you can start to figure out a way to get more out of that time by speeding up whatever it is you're doing. And, even though obviously my focus is often technical game design, rapid prototyping, gameplay programming, those sort of things, we've certainly find the same things to be true for people who are working in Blender and Photoshop and other kind of art tools or asset tools or otherwise audio creation for that matter, where everything is super slow your first time you're trying to do it in Blender and Photoshop, whatever it is. And then every single time you do it again, or do something similar, do something related, do something slightly different, you're getting faster and faster and faster at it. And this is the same sort of things where, I do my speed coding videos and I can crank something out in 5 or 10 minutes because it's building blocks that I've used for many other kind of projects before by now, or that I've talked to other people through now hundreds of times. By the time that I just sort of can whip those things together, it's because I'm dealing with in big chunks, any one of which I'm not having to solve for the first time. Any one of which piece I'm not having to think my way through. I'm able to sort of snap together these things that I've seen and varied and reused so many different times, so many different kinds of ways, that it's no big deal to kind of pull those together in a way that when I got started programming, right, I would have spent literally weeks on something that now I can crank together a whole lot faster. It's part of why I'm often able to help fill in gaps or keep a game on track in Gamketo Club, or for that matter, Krister McFunky Pants Kaitila, is between the two of us, we've got over 50 years experience building games. That's no exaggeration. I've been doing it for 20, Krister for over 30. And that because of that, when we're trying to help fill in a project to keep something on track, we know that any given week, if there's something that needs to get filled in so things can kind of keep rolling along, we can go in there and literally, in the same half an hour, get done things that might take a beginner much longer. And it's just how we can make sure that things keep rolling, that the pieces all kind of get, you know, accounted for, so that everybody's work winds up in a released game, so that there's never any sort of hold up, nobody getting stuck. Same sort of ways that if somebody has questions, as I'll talk about, I guess talked about the other day, you know, we're able to talk them through how they can do it off the top of our heads, because it's not our first time trying to navigate that kind of challenge. It's not our first time trying to answer that kind of question. It's something that we've seen before in dozens of variations, and that's how we're able to increase our time effectively by getting more done in the time that we have, whatever amount of time that might be. So that's it for the day. Just thinking about how can you really focus your practice, focus your learning, focus your experience in a way that's going to enable you to get far more done in the same amount of time. Because again, that really the amount we're getting done is kind of the measure of our progress, more so than that amount of time. Everybody's got limited. Everybody's got other things. Everybody's got to sleep. Everybody's got to work. Everybody's got to eat. Everybody's got these other obligations in our life, other responsibilities. And the question is, how can we squeeze more productivity, more progress, more tangible results out of whatever amount of time we got to work with 1 week to the next? Thanks so much for tuning in. Have another video for you tomorrow.